I want to talk now about hidden claims. And these are benefits that I believe adjusters either do a poor job explaining or don't explain at all. And these are very important because remember, when you're injured on the job, you have a number of out-of-pocket expenses that are related to the injury. And workers' compensation is supposed to reimburse the injured worker for their expenses. The first hidden claim is reimbursement for mileage. An injured worker is entitled to receive reimbursement for mileage, for travel back and forth to the doctor, from their home to the doctor, and travel for vocational rehabilitation. And they're entitled to receive reimbursement or payment per mile if they travel more than 20 miles round trip. For example, 50 cents per mile. And I cannot tell you how many folks I've spoken with that did not know that they were entitled to mileage reimbursement, when in fact they've been paying out of pocket for gas and other expenses so they can go back and forth to the doctor. Another hidden claim, or a claim that the adjusters will rarely bring to your attention, involves an incorrect compensation rate. We find often that after we audit the compensation rate that we find an underpayment, or that the adjuster has underpaid the injured worker. There's two common errors that adjusters make when determining the correct compensation rate. The first involves including overtime. When we spoke earlier about how your compensation rate is determined, we mentioned that it's based on your average gross earnings for the period of time before you got hurt. And that average gross earnings include payment for any overtime or any other amount, any other payment that are made in lieu of wages. We see often that adjusters, instead of including overtime, may base the compensation rate on what that worker was paid per hour for a 40-hour work week. And that's simply incorrect. All wages, including overtime, should be included in the gross wages. Another typical error we see is when there's been less than a year's worth of earnings before the injury date. And the adjuster, instead of taking the actual number of weeks worked, for example, if there were 25 weeks of earnings before the injury date, the adjuster may take the yearly earnings for the period of time before the injury and divide that by 52 weeks. And that's going to result in a much lower compensation rate than what it should be. Another hidden claim involves attendant care. If the treating physician has ordered that the injured worker have in-home services, for example, care for daily needs or medical attention, and that service is provided by a spouse or another loved one, then that person providing the care is entitled to be paid just like a regular professional would had they been providing that service. The last hidden claim involves a 10% penalty payment for a safety rule violation. If the employer intentionally disregarded a safety statute or an OSHA regulation and that resulted in injury, then that could result in a 10% penalty in addition to the regular compensation rate.